scared when I do these things, especially with people that are in like the film kind of things and editing and stuff, because I literally just wang my way through stuff like this.
Well, I'll be honest with you, mate, like, because of working with Simon, and it's only been me for so long, like, I say so long, a couple of years, but I was just in this echo chamber of like, well, what I'm doing must be right. Do you know what I mean? And not knowing. And then when I work with other people, like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, I don't know any different. I don't know any different, mate.
It's weird. Like, I did a podcast I did it with Geese, and he's been doing like the film documentary stuff for a long time, and I've done it with a few other like with some like surfing documentary makers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they must think, I always kind of think like, I've got these, my setup is not greatly expensive. You know, it probably costs like 250 quid. Like I said, because I'm a tight ass. And,
works though, mate. Yeah.
So it's always a little bit like, but if it works, it works.
Mate,
right?
like, I don't think, what I say is this, stories beat stuff. You know what I mean? As long as like the conversation that's good, and I don't think anyone really, well, I certainly don't care about like quality of kit. It's like, you could film, for me, my perspective, you could film something on a potato, but if it's like powerful story or, you know, good images or whatever, then like,
Works.
Yeah, it works, yeah.
Should we get into it?
Yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Grumpy Surfer podcast. I'm Adz, and my guest today is James Malone. James, how are you?
Good, mate. Yeah, really good. Excited to be here, and thanks for having me down here.
So you're a former Royal Marine, and you've got yourself into filmmaking and documentary making.
Yeah.
Some of your stuff I've seen on through social media through a mutual friend who kind of like put us into contact. Like the content's really cool. Lots of varied stuff there. You know, how did you find getting into filmmaking? Was it something you did beforehand, or you know, how did you find getting into it?
Well, it was more of it's something I always wanted to do before I joined the Corps, and I actually had a place got accepted into Plymouth College of Art and Design to do something creative. So I would have done like a foundation degree there, and then I know I would have gone into filmmaking and photography. But I was kind of dissuaded away from that by my family. I think because at the time I was like bodyboarding and BMXing. That's what I did, and they were like, you haven't showed any real sort of like promise or academia. So you probably won't succeed. And in my kind of arrogance and stubbornness, I suppose, I just kind of looked at what my dad did and said, all right, well, I'll join the Marines then, because that's easy, isn't it? And he sort of challenged my decision, shall we say, on that, and sort of said like, I don't think he thought I'd be successful given my like what I just spoke about, the kind of surfing and just, you know, doing skids and wheelies on a BMX or whatever. And then, joined the Corps. But once I'd left, I did various other jobs and got into photography as a distraction from drinking, essentially, because I was doing a lot of that, and it was more of a problem than anything else. But for the filmmaking specifically, there just kind of came a time I got sober, I'd bought a camera, and then it was like, you know, it's now or never. I was 32. If I don't do what I want to do or I think I can do, then I'm just going to live in this kind of miserable spiral of, you know, classic kind of bloke syndrome of doing a job just because it pays all right. You hate it, but, you know, whatever, do it for the rest of your life because you get paid at the end of every month and you don't want to take that risk. But I just thought I can't. You know, if I could get over drinking and found freedom on the other side of it, then who knows what the potential is with the filmmaking. So that's kind of in the kind of loosest sense, like how it happened.
It's quite a frequent sort of crescendo of different comments from different people on the podcast, and it always kind of leads to that people don't want to be in the rat race, or how difficult it is to get out of it. with today's like society dictates that you must do a 9 to 5 job, you must earn this amount of money. If you've got a family, you must have a house, you must do this, you must do that. There's no sort of like subtract from that anymore. I don't think everyone has to be, stuck in this linear line of kind of like their life's path. And if you step outside of that, then it's really difficult to do. I think coming from the military and seeing different parts of the world and how people live, in some ways can kind of give you that sort of like kick in the arse to do something a little bit different. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people when they leave the military, they just fall into that, I've got to earn 80 grand a year, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But there are different people out there that do kind of step to one side and go down that different path sometimes.
Yeah, I think the curse of creativity is not being able to monetize it, and if you don't monetize it, you'll starve. So, and also coming from, I guess, what we call like working class background, is it's seen as a risk to not do something that gives you immediate feedback, like going and learn a trade where you can get, you can be a labourer and get immediate like cash back, I suppose, for the effort you put in. You get a result out of it, and that result pays the bills. So like, whereas something creative, you don't have that. It's just basically like there's no set pathway, there's no blueprint. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose it's in that way like less attractive to some people than know that they could just go and, like in the military, put a load of hard work in, you kind of get like feedback and you get paid regardless. Do you know what I mean? So that template works. And I don't know, it depends when you leave the forces. I was quite young and did other jobs, but yeah, especially if you're more established and got a family in that, I can definitely see how like go and be a project manager or go and do some security contracting or whatever it might be and immediately get that cash and sort of a safe bet. But yeah, I think I was doing rope access just before I quit. Before that, I'd done maritime security, classic. Got outside and...
Well, you left at that 12-year period, didn't you?
No, I didn't. I left. I didn't do a very long time in the Corps. It was only 5 years.
Okay.
So, but that was in 2012, and I think I had like delusions of grandeur of doing like 22 years in the Corps and being one time hoofing bloke. Because I just thought that's what my dad did. I thought that everyone did that. I just thought everyone stayed, and all his mates were like not old and bold, but like had very established careers and had gone from like the first Gulf and were then into Herricks and stuff and Banner and Sierra Leone and all that stuff. So I thought, well, that's just what you did. But I didn't understand, I suppose, like the intensity of operations that they kind of grew into, certainly in like the Herrick period. And I left and got into maritime security. Did that for 3 years. It was pretty stagnant at that, although it was a great time as a 23-year-old man getting paid good cash to basically essentially travel to some interesting places, going out and getting drunk in Mahajanga in Madagascar. Like no one's doing that on a normal night out, are they? So that aspect was cool, but I got bored with it and wanted to develop a bit. I still had that like burgeoning interest in something creative, but again, too much of a risk. So I suppose the interest there was then in being outside, and someone told me about rope access. I googled it and was like, yeah, I'll do that, and just did that for 7 years, and that took me around the world as well. I went to New Zealand, working on like the earthquakes, that kind of zones, offshore in the gold mines in Australia, and then it was beyond that when I came back to the UK in 2019, just before COVID, found myself doing non-destructive testing, like basically using ultrasound on steel pipes and telling people how thick they are, day in, day out. Although it was off ropes, it was a very small part of the job, but literally thinking to myself, I am wasting my life. Like, this is a waste of my time. This is not me. Like, I can't get my head around people who love data and stats and stuff, and they do. But for me, I just felt like the sands of time, so to speak, was slipping away, and I was in this container in West Wales, like writing down that a steel steam pipe had degraded by a micron of a millimetre over 12 months, do you know what I mean? And someone asking me what I thought about it, do you know what I mean? I couldn't give a toss.
Before I joined the Corps, I did a job working at a windscreen company in a factory. I did numerous jobs. Well, not numerous. I did maybe a handful of jobs because I joined when I was 17, 18. So I did a labouring job, digging holes.
Honest work.
Trenches, pretty much building the trench.
Yeah.
Doing metal work. But then I basically got signed off from that job after about 6 months, I think it was. And then I went and worked at this factory where this was my job. I got windscreens from one pallet, so they'd come in a pallet and they got all strung up. I had to take that windscreen off the pallet, put it onto another one, put some like little square buffers like you do at IKEA, you know, they put on the bottom of the chairs and stuff to stop them rubbing on the floor. On that windscreen, put another windscreen on top of it, and then I had to do that. That was my job for 6 hours a day, God. 8 hours a day.
Soul destroying.
And there was blood, but you know, you're talking about people enjoying doing that stuff. There were people there, like old boys that had been there for donkey's years, and they loved doing it. And they were like, when I first started, I was like you are with any job when you get super keen. I was banging out like 200 windscreens a day. By the time I left, I was only there for about 3 weeks. By the time I left, I was doing like 20.
Yeah.
It was so shit. It was, honestly, this is the classic cliche, right? You know when you say, I'll just go and hide in the toilet? I literally did that. I went and had a shit and I stayed there for like half an hour. It was horrific.
Right. I think I did a couple of jobs like working in co-op on the tills and stuff, or, you know, as a waiter and that. And people used to say to me, like, cheer up. And we're like,
why?
Yeah, this is so bad. Someone moaning that they ordered chicken and they've got beef or whatever. I'm like, just be happy you got a meal, mate. Like, I don't care. But yeah, I think those you say like those jobs are really good at helping you. I think maybe we're fortunate in that we did things. We found out really early what we didn't want. Do you know what I mean? They're quite formative over there. My brother remembers telling me my brother told me he was digging holes in the snow once and like post holes for a fence or something, and the foreman just shouted out a window like, "Mate, do you even want to be a builder?" My brother was like, "No, like I don't want to be here doing this." But yeah, they're a good like tide mark, aren't they? Like for figuring out the rest of your life, I suppose. And I guess that's where the Corps comes in.
Well, you mentioned that you spent 5 years in the Corps. So when you passed out of training, I know you went to 4.5 and 4.2.
Yeah.
How did you find that whole experience of going through recruit training and then joining the commando unit afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, from the top, it's I'd say the most incredible thing I've ever done. I think if you think about like the belief it takes to go and do that, but yeah, it's I suppose it's hard to sum up really, and I still reflect on it all the time, and still speak to people all the time about it because it is so formative. And used to get shit, didn't you, for spinning training dits? But let's be honest, like they are some of the funniest like moments of your life at that point, because you've never been in a scenario with that many people kind of wanting the same thing, and you're all thrown together, and you're just trying to not be the shit one, but not be too good either, so you get too much responsibility, and then, you know, how the mighty fall, etc. But I joined in 2006, like late 2006, with 935 Troop, and I think I come from a military family, so my uncle was in the RAF Reg, my dad was in the Corps, granddad was, you know, in North Africa in the Second World War, etc., in the artillery. So there was a level of it, like the kind of sternness and the, I suppose, like not the thrashings. I didn't get thrashed at home, but I just kind of like my old man took recruit troops through. I was in recce troop and like 4.2 and stuff. Did 20. So loads of it I was just kind of like all right with, like especially when you get shouted like you get shouted at to get on the landing or whatever. I was kind of like, it's like water off a duck's back. Like I was like, yeah, like that didn't bother me. But I think what was having a father in the Royal Marines probably put you slightly ahead of people in terms of the attitude, and therefore the level of expectation is probably a bit higher, and living up to that I suppose was probably the thing I found most difficult, because I mean I don't think my dad was like a shit bloke in the Corps, so we'll say that. And I do remember being stood outside the armoury like 2 weeks in, you're about to get issued your rifle for the first time, and a bloke called Tommy Roberts come out, who I knew from like growing up, and he was like branch sponsor of the ML branch at the time, and I knew him just from like barbecues. I went to school with his daughter and stuff, and he, in front of the training team, he was like, recruit Malone. Turned around to the training team and said, this bloke's going to be a star. And I was just like, oh, for God's sake, leave me alone. Like, I just want to get on with it. But and like, I do remember sort of being in like week 9 and being sat in like a toilet cubicle, and then thinking, not knowing, I suppose that maybe at that point I'd not been broken, but you know when you reach that point where you're like, do I really want to do this? Is this for me? And I couldn't work out my like general direction of travel, which is kind of like how I live my life really. And I was like just trying to imagine going home and telling my dad like, yeah, it's not for me. Imagine knocking on that door, what would I say to him? And when I imagined that, like no words come out of my mouth, so I was like, well, just what do I do? And at that moment I just remember hearing the door getting booted open from like the ablutions, and it was Brian Smith, the corporal at the time, and he just like, Malone, where are you? And I was like, I'm in the toilet, corporal. And he just started like throwing toilet rolls at me. He was like, you got to get outside in 2 minutes, we're going to Puzzle Palace or whatever. And that just kind of like shook me out of it. And I was like, all right, okay, on to the next thing then. And then managed to get to week 22, and then I got an injury, which like took ages. It's where I met Ben Gallagher, which I think you know Ben.
Yeah, I know Ben very well.
Yeah, and he was one of the first blokes I met in Hunter. It's blokes like that actually that kind of get you through those like sort of periods of your life, because he was in the same boat as me. He's like endlessly positive, the most peculiar, weird fish I've maybe met in my life.
He's the cleverest, solid person I know.
Like I walked in, mate, carrying, you know, with my crutches and carrying my Lovitt shoes or whatever, trying not to scratch him. And he starts talking about Gorbachev, and I was just like, "What the hell are you on about, mate?" I just want to know if you want to come to Scran.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
Yeah, but really good guy. Yeah, and got injured. I had like a knee injury, and then I had a chest infection, which got diagnosed as asthma. So they were like, "Right, you're out. You can't have asthma in the Corps." I was like, whoa. So it took like a long time for that to get figured out. I had to go and do the like 50 Cent, like running on the treadmill with all the stuff to just go, yeah, it's just a misdiagnosed chest infection. Then passed out with 947 troop. Sort of like, I think the whole journey would have been about 12 months, I think, rather than like the 8 months. And while I was in Hunter, I do remember thinking very specifically about the feeling that I would have when it got to King Squad, and like it was tangible. Like I don't know why, but I was just really, there was just loads of clarity around that thought. And then, you know, when we did get to King Squad and did the commando tests, like I had that feeling that I'd imagined for so long. Do you know what I mean? I think it's, along with meeting people like Ben and a bunch of other people, like it's definitely being able to hang your hat on something and making it tangible that kind of got me through, I think, because certainly, like, I mean, commando training's hard enough as it is, but when you get injured and then have to, like, you know, watch your troop march off the parade square and go to their respective units, and you're just, you know, back to square one again. You've got a smaller circle of friends. I suppose it does take a bit, you know, it gets bandied around, but resilience to kind of keep the belief, I suppose, and being able to, I don't know why, but I just always kind of pictured myself on my point of view on King Squad, and it definitely worked for me. So yeah, from there I went to got drafted to 4-5 Commando after a bit of driver training at Leconfield, which everyone was doing at the time. but rocked up to Zulu Company, which was pretty cool, but also not terrifying. But it was obviously you're anxious, aren't you, when you get to your commando unit? And I suppose what I realised when I got there was I come out of commando training and felt like, I say this a lot, but in every fibre of my being and in my bone marrow, I felt like I could do anything. I could do anything. And that is like a feeling I've never forgotten, but certainly lost maybe it being, I don't know, something I truly believed in. Like I remember the feeling. And then you get to a unit and you realise like everyone's got the same colour beret and that what you just did for 9 months or 12 months in my case is essentially a minimum standard. That's the minimum standard. So I suppose trying to live up to that was something that was my next concern, I guess.
I have a different kind of perspective on all of that because I've said it a few times, like on the podcast. I fucking hated training. Hated it. I didn't enjoy being there. I was scared the whole time. And then when it got to the King squad, I just had enough. I got back trooped twice because my personality is very different to everybody else's. I wasn't this determined, didn't show that I was like this determined, steely-eyed dealer of death that wants to smash everything, that wants to kill everything. I'm super clever. It's none of that stuff. I was just kind of like just this happy-go-lucky kind of like super chilled out guy that didn't show that he wanted to be there, didn't show that he had loads of motivation and stuff, because I'm quite sort of a placid, emotionless person, you know, until I met my wife, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
So by the time I'd got to King Squad, I'd been like knocked down so much, but still had the personal motivation and courage to keep going. And I think, like altogether, it was just a combination of stubbornness and just not wanting to fail something. That's generally how I got through the majority of things during my career in the Corps, was I just didn't want to fail at anything. So I kept going, even if I fucking hated it. So by the time I'd come to pass out of training, the King Squad and stuff, this is going to sound really bad. My sister came, she was like in her sort of mid to late teens. She didn't want to be there. I brought two friends down there that had absolutely no interest whatsoever, and they were just kind of sat around there with like really moody faces, which kind of had like an influence on me. I've got a photo of in the Savile room, the function room now, not the Savile room. And everyone's just like really fucking sad.
Wow.
And I've got like I should have a really happy face. And I've got a photo outside the entrance to the Savile room where the glass doors are, of me and my dad. And I just look like I just don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So like when I eventually got drafted up to 4-5 in Comanche after that, it was kind of like I just got out of the place.
Yeah.
And I hated it, which is kind of ironic, really, because I live a mile and a half down the road.
Can't get enough of it now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I love it. My whole life's the Marines. No, so it was just like a really kind of weird time for me. And I think the majority of the things within my life, I've achieved them, and I haven't celebrated it. I've talked about this, a couple of times since starting the podcast back up again. Building my own gym and being self-employed and being an entrepreneur and celebrating the fact that you've done something, you've achieved something. I'm not like that. I built it, right? What's the next thing?
Yeah.
I move on like really, really quickly. It took me probably a couple of weeks afterwards I'd done something to go, actually, you achieved it. Well, I mean, I'm talking about the gym more than anything, but when I go back and I think about, the reflection of, if I go back to my mentality, my mental state, when I passed out of training, it wasn't that. It was just moving on to the next thing. I never looked at it as going, this is an amazing achievement. Becoming a PTI, if you'd have known me when I passed out of training, there's no fucking way this side of Naggers, you would have said, yeah, Adz license going to be a PTI in 11 years' time. You wouldn't have done that because I was rubbish. I was rubbish at endurance. When I joined the Corps, I had no idea that the Corps was endurance based. I was a sprinter, a sprinter and a jumper. That was it. You know, I was built for like explosiveness, not endurance. So every single thing that I did in the Corps was just like hard because my body hadn't transferred from those fast twitching, sprinting, power based, short power based like fibers to the slow twitching fibers to being an endurance athlete. It took me the time of being in the Corps to like transfer my physicality into that, and it was just horrific.
I suppose that you have the best part of 20 years like developing that way you thought you should be in terms of like physicality and then even mindset, to be honest, like and then there's that abrupt change when you do get into training. I
don't know. The only reason why I became a PTI is because I was sick of doing a fucking 6-minute mile pace.
Yeah.
And if I took the fizz, then I could do a 10-minute mile pace and actually achieve something out of it instead of being like the troop handbrake and hanging out at the back.
Yeah.
And everyone's saying that you're shit because you can't run fast.
Yeah. I think when I reflect back on now, at the time, I think I thought you'd get your green lid. Like I just said, I realised that there's a minimum standard. And it's interesting hearing you talking about like not enjoying any of it, not wanting to kind of, you essentially couldn't wait to get out of Lympstone, which is enough motivation for, you know, some people to get out of there and your career diversifies. But I've realised now that to be that kind of person, you talked about it just then, about being, you know, steely-eyed deliverer of death or whatever, that's actually really hard to be in that mode for quite a lot of the time. And for me, I always felt like I was redlining, trying to get there and be in this, switch into this attitude that you have to have like for operations. Obviously not like when you're on camp because it's fairly chilled out, but like realizing that just wasn't, I know now that just wasn't me as a person. I was doing what I thought potentially other people wanted me to do, or, you know, I felt like that was the only way that I could make something of myself. And I'm glad I did do it because it gave me a good sort of benchmark. Like I said, that feeling of thinking I could do anything. I can't say I would have that from, you know, certainly didn't find that when I was working at Co-op. So, you know, I am glad I did it. It just, it's the same now with filmmaking is, I understood when I got to 4-5 that there was no arrival, there's no finish line, there's only pursuit of, you know, development and excellence and diversification, and there's no arrival. And that's when I only just learnt that, really. But that's been an important thing, I think me personally.
After getting to 4-5, how long was it before you went away and like started doing the Herrick tours and stuff?
Well, we did 6 months straight into PDT and then went on Herrick 9 with Zulu Company, and that's the only tour I did. That's the only tour I did. It's obviously pretty, I don't know, what should we say? It's like intense, I guess, for me,
But going from recruit training, then going to a unit, having that initial, like, deer in the headlights experience of being there, because there's all these really big characters you kind of start to hear about, personalities and stuff like that, to doing 6 months and then going on to pre-deployment training and then going out somewhere, you know, that's pretty intense.
Yeah. I think it didn't really... the first couple of months at the 4-5 was essentially like a dream, because we were just... I'd mates that I'd known from training. We were just going on the piss in Dundee and like meeting the locals basically, and it was a real good time. And I just like couldn't believe my luck. It was like being in Neverland. Although it was Dundee, it felt like real good at the time. And it was a really unique period of time because everyone was excited and we were going on to do something. And then I think maybe what first hit me is when you do all these like clear lower decks and stuff, and all these like organisational days, I suppose, before you go away doing the last bits of admin, and it's like blues inspection, Lovett's inspection, kit inspection. You start seeing people who've got like MCs, CGCs, and then oak cleaves, and you know, all that kind of stuff, and you're like, wow, like there's some you don't get them for turning up. Do you know what I mean? And then you realise you go into those same areas of operations that those people have gone to, and I suppose that kind of made it on some level kind of real for me. And then I got given the task of I was in a section with a bloke called Bish and a guy called Bugsy. He got CGC on that tour. Bish got injured on the tour. So I suppose flying out there, I was kind of thinking, yeah, well, I think we're in a good group here. It's going to be a good experience. This is what we all wanted to do, or I told myself that. And then at Baston, you do it's 2 weeks, is it, or maybe a week of I don't even know what it is. It's just like
acclimatization.
Yeah, walking around, getting told to take your hands out your pockets, and eating good food, thinking, oh, it's all right out here. And then we had this meeting from or this lecture off SIB, is it, special investigations in Royal Military Police, and they were talking to us about rules of engagement, crimes that had been happening, the Taliban, murders, and all this kind of stuff, and war fighting essentially, and what we could and couldn't do. And someone asked I can't remember the exact specificity around the question, but I do remember a hand going up and someone saying, what about in this scenario, what do we do then? And the bloke on the lectern went, where are you going, mate? And we went, FOB Gibraltar. And he went, mate, we ain't going down there to take swabs. It's almost like, don't worry about that. And I was like, oh right, it must be kind of wild down there, I guess. And I think 2 Power had been out there before, and it was the AO where they'd lost a few lads through IEDs, and they'd had a friendly fire incident. I say friendly fire, I hate that term, but friendly fire with the Apaches and stuff. There was some miscommunication, etc., and they'd lost a few lads there. So they'd lost a sergeant major down there. Do you know what I mean? It'd been pretty kinetic. So I think it got really real then. But I mean, it felt good because all the guys that were around me, they'd all in large part been to Afghan before, Sierra Leone, Ireland, Kosovo, Telic, Jacana. So they're all very experienced. And I think you talked about it in a previous podcast, maybe the one with Liz, the CH-47 crew person.
Yep.
You talked about sort of that ramp up to operations, whereas having joined at a particular period, so say 2003, 2004, I say you would have had the benefit of going on operations that in some instances, not all, but in some instances may have not been as intense or kinetic as the sort of early to mid Herrick periods. So it was almost like you understood yourself as a Royal Marine and your role and how you were in those situations. You alluded to Jacana being a really good tour in terms of what you were doing, versus, well, I look at that and I've seen the videos, I spoke to people that done it, and Bish, my section commander, said the same thing. He was like, I understood myself as a Royal Marine and a section commander, and then we went to Herrick, and he was like, that's by a country mile the most intense conflict he'd ever been involved in, and he subsequently got injured. But whereas if you're 18, 19, passing out the box 6 months later, and you're just bang, straight in the middle of it, there you go, there's a Valen, go Barmering kind of thing. So it's I did one tour and I've got no benchmark for other tours. I'll just have an assumption that they're all like that. So when stuff happens and it gets busy or you have contacts, you're just oh, this just must how it is. This is just what it's like. So yeah, it's interesting, I suppose, quite quick evolution if you think about it.
When I passed out of training, like I say, I was in what I call the golden age, right between. So I joined up in 2000. I left in May 22. So the first 11 years of my career, I was bouncing in and out of Afghanistan, Iraq, and taking recruits through training. And I went to 4-5. I did what it was called Fleet Protection Group at the time, which is now 4-3, I think it's called. Looking after the nukes, and I got a transfer to do my anti-tanks, which then after I did my anti-tanks course, I went straight up to 4-5, was there for a few months, then we went straight out in Jacana. The Twin Towers went down, and then 6 months later it was up the Hindu Kush. So it was crazy. Landing in Bagram and air base, which at the time was just a concrete airstrip covered in mines. So everywhere was you couldn't step off the hard standing because there was a good chance you're going to get hit by a anti-personnel mine. So yeah, it was interesting, but you do. I say, do you get used to it? I don't really know. I know a lot of guys that did have done one tour, like, nah, it's not for me, and then they leave, which is cool because at the end of the day, being shot at and people trying to kill you, trying to blow you up, is a really intense kind of feeling. I think you can say. And I'll give you a really good example of this. I'm not going to say the guy's name. So when I was on my anti-tanks course, there was this lad that was it was really intense. He's like, he's like one of these guys that just wanted to fucking kill everything, like to kill cats, rats, shoot everything. Like, absolutely nuts guy. Really nice guy, but he was really intense. Only small. Don't know why I said that, but he was small. And he went on to the invasion of Iraq. He was with 40. He was with my mate Tomo. Got caught in an ambush. Their pins goer got blown up, and he got separated. And he tells, he's told me the story of that he got separated and was lying in a ditch on his own. The pins goer had burnt a hole in his trousers, so his knob was hanging out, running around, right? And it was that's the only thing I really remember about it, is that he's running around with his cock hanging out.
Would you? Yeah.
But you don't hear those things, do you? And he says he remembers he was lying in the trench and he could hear the Iraqi army literally meters away, throwing grenades over the top and crawling through their latrines to get out of the area. When he got back, he was quiet. He was a different person. So it's quite interesting because the kind of imaginary Call of Duty-esque thing, like being in the contact, being like Star Wars firefights, rounds going everywhere, RPGs and all that stuff going off. Been there, done that. It's fucking brilliant until someone gets shot. Until something happens that's negative towards what the situation dictates. And that experience does change you. But I'm also a big believer in that people's mentality and the way that they look at the world has a direct reflection on how they can respond to it and how they actually deal with it, which we'll come on to in a bit, which is the reason the film that you've just been recently making. So coming back, and he obviously had early signs of PTSD when he came back, and he subsequently left through mental health. But talking about doing the job and everyone's super keen to do it. One of the key things I used to say when I was taking recruits through training was that be careful what you wish for, because the nods were I can't wait to get out to Afghan. I can't wait to get amongst it. I said, look, it's great saying it now, but when you get in that situation and a round bounces off your helmet, or an RPG goes off next to you and you're in a big plume of smoke and you're checking your body to see if you're okay, then you won't be saying that. Now you'll be actually quite thankful that all the stuff and the experience that we're giving you and telling you what to do, because we've been there and done it, is going to be more beneficial to you than actually wanting to be there now. You're probably going to wish that you're not there.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you're correct. There's definitely things we did on that tour at FOB Gibraltar that I will, die on the hill and say that they were fucking cool. For want of a better phrase, but your door kicking and sort of essentially delivering good news,
doing the job you're chilling up to do. That's why you see these advertisements and these video footage of and you're watching films I grew up with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Commando.
Yeah, oh mate, yeah, exactly. It is, I definitely haven't got as big arms as Arnie, and I'm not shooting a LMG with one arm, but like there was moments where you're doing, CQB as best it can be in a mud compound kind of thing, and
I call it fish.
yeah, fighting in someone's house.
Fighting in someone's
class.
house.
Yeah, I love that saying. But then also just remember the first time sort of withdrawing from places and, mortars creeping in danger close, or Apaches kind of like shooting you in onto stuff, and you're 19, or like that is mega. That is really, really. Obviously, it's intense. It's enjoyable to an extent, and there is no feeling. It kind of gives me goosebumps now, but like the feeling and the intensity is better than any drug I've ever used, or any other experience I've been in. It is like someone I know did like ayahuasca or something like that, or some maybe DMT, and I said, "Oh, what was that like?" And he said. He went, there's no point in me trying to explain to you about that experience. I was like, well, good, just try. And he was like, okay, it would be like, he said, me trying to explain this to you is like taking a horse skydiving and then getting a horse with its horse dialect to try and explain to all its mates in English what parachuting was like. They've got no point of reference. Like, you've got no point of reference. There's no point. And that's probably maybe the best description of not being able to articulate how something is, because it is just super intense. But then on the flip side of that, stuff does get real. Like, I suppose when someone first got injured, we had a guy got shot in an ambush at night, and that was like Star Wars kind of. There's people like, in irrigation ditches, like holding their breath and stuff underwater, trying not to get shot, and someone got a LASM out to fire it and took a round through it, or people getting rounds through their day sacks and stuff. A good friend of mine was doing a GPMG gunner. Was doing a belt change, and there was a splash in front of him, and he carried on with the belt change, and when they got back to camp, realised that while he was doing his belt change, a round had gone through one of the bipod legs, grazed the pistol grip of the GPMG, and gone through the armpit of his shirt. So like, it gets pretty real when stuff like that is happening, and then obviously, it gets into like ID territory and all that other stuff. So, and then you realise, well, maybe we were a bit arrogant before, maybe we thought we were indestructible, and maybe we just didn't know how lucky we were. But also, you need that level, you need that arrogance. You have to be, for want of a better phrase, a bit of a dickhead sometimes to even, do your laces up and get out the front gate kind of thing. You just have to have that part of you. But like I alluded to before, it's quite hard to, like, for me it was to, I was always kind of jealous. Like, I kind of felt, I was always fighting to get up there, as I always felt like there was a lot of other people that kind of were able to sit in and around that kind of zone a bit easier than me, if you know what I mean. And I just think that's personality types and background and how you brought up and stuff. So yeah, I guess the whole thing is being careful what you wish for, and the intensity of it is like, I could talk about it till the cows come home, mate, because it's just such a vast subject and uniquely different for everyone as well. Like, you and me could be sat this distance apart, being in the same contact or same experience or same ID strike, and you might think it was the worst thing in the world, and I might just go, it wasn't all right, that wasn't too bad. Like, but you've had a round in your day sack and through your LASM or your rocket launcher, and I haven't. I've just been like changing firing position every 2 to 3 rounds, and it was fine. Do you know what I mean? So it's all like, it's quite an individual experience, even though you share it with people.
Yeah, I have a different. I had a different perspective from it, from my one from my last tour, because I got blown up on Herrick 5 2 weeks before I was supposed to come home.
Oh,
so I got blown up by an anti-tank mine in the Wimmick. I got Casevac bag. Nothing. I say nothing major. It's not like normal getting blown up, but
yeah, don't diminish it. It's like
just don't be shit. Dislocated wrist, blast injuries to my eyes and my ears. And then went back and did recruits. Then I joined back up with 40 and ended up going back out on Herrick 12, which was the one that the tour that the Corps itself took the most casualties. It was it was pretty IED heavy, but also contact heavy as we went along. Anyway, when I got to 40, I got told that we were going to be vehicle mounted and we're going to be foot mounted, but it was more vehicle mounted, and it took me a lot to kind of of courage really to get back into that, because I'd been in vehicles and got blown up before on that, but this time it was going to be a little bit different because we were going into the mastiffs, which is even worse because it's like climb. Do you remember the red? This is the only way I can describe it. You remember when you were a kid and you had the red and yellow little car that used to run around like the Flintstones?
Yeah.
Like getting into one of them, but the only way out of it is through the back window. And I was like, fucking hell, this is like, what happens if we get blown up? What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? And I just came to the conclusion that just fucking get on with it. You're doing it, so you can't think about it. You just gotta get on with it and do it. And subsequently, I got blown up 22 times in mastiffs and other vehicles on that tour, and came out of it clean, which is one of the reasons why I changed branches. Really,
that's a fair one, mate. That is a fair one.
But yes, but that kind of like that feeling, you know. If you ever go out on the ground and you might get injured or shot, I'm talking like this like it's a normal thing, but it's not.
Totally normal. Yeah, totally normal.
But then like the next day you're going back out on patrol again. And you're like, oh man, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
You know, I had loads of occasions on Herrick 12 specifically where people had got shot or blown up, or you know, had got injured on a certain patrol, and you're going back out the next day. And it just came to the point where we were getting told to go out on these patrols because it was a patrol matrix that the HQ wanted to be on. I was acting stripey at the time because our sergeant had been welfare back home. So these guys, my friends, were now my men, and I was like, and I was constantly going into that CP and going like, why we go out on this patrol? Oh, we just want to go and check this building out. Well, why? What significance does it have? Oh, we just want to go out there. But it's going past 2 murder rolls that we know are constantly fired every time we leave. So why are we walking past there? Oh, we've got to go and check this empty mosque. But it's an empty mosque. It's got no significance to it. Oh, but it's part of the patrol matrix.
Yeah.
So you're saying the patrol matrix is more important than somebody's life.
Yeah.
And I just started to get like super frustrated with it in the end, which, you know,
as you would, mate. You're talking about what you just went through there. Like, I think a level of frustration is pretty normal in an extraordinary situation.
But I think, but from that, I think everyone had that perspective to a certain extent. And I think the hierarchy had pressure from the powers that be to do something and, you know, have boots on the ground. But, you know, when you look at Afghan from a sort of like a change perspective over the decade, you know, that we were there, just over a decade that we were there, is that from just walking around, you know, getting into contacts, diving into ditches and stuff, and walking up and down mountains free, to, you know, you're walking sometimes 20 miles like a day up and down mountains or whatever it was, or going on patrol, and you go out for a couple of hours, come back, and you do a significant amount of ground where, like, you know, the last one I didn't do Herrick 14, but 12, you did 2K in like 5 hours.
Yeah, very slow.
Because you were valiant and having to mark lines so you didn't get blown up by IEDs and stuff. And that significant pressure, like, changed things. Significantly, I think, and there are, you know, from a commander's point of view, that's more frustrating than like just being told what to do, I think.
Yeah, I spoke to a guy who says very similar things to you. I just met up with him. I was in Zulu company with him, and he went to 40 on Herrick 12, and then joined SAS. So he did like 12 years SAS, and I caught up with him the other day. And he said very similar things to you about that kind of level of pressure and like constant like anxiety around being almost like hemmed in to operate within a certain template. Do you know what I mean? And what that does to a person's psyche. And he also talked about, for the everyday bloke on the ground, who, you know, they might not have seen a casualty. They might not have seen an ID strike. They might not have gotten into contact. But where 40 were and the way where he was operating, he said all you're hearing is ID strikes, all you're hearing is contacts, all you're hearing is zap numbers over the radio. Yeah, and he was like, that constant static, essentially, in the background it's very hard to stay above that, I think, and no matter who you are, it's definitely gonna get you questioning kind of some of the actions that you're being asked to take or the patrols that you're doing. And then, you know, if you look at, like, you compare your career to what you're actually doing versus the poster that you saw, you know, where you're like, you know, I see the bloke on the speedboat at night, 99.9% need not apply, versus me with a bomber and a bottle of foo-foo powder doing, like you say, 5 or 2K in 5 hours or whatever it is, like thinking, the fuck am I doing here? Like,
what you don't realise is that bloke that's on that boat is fucking freezing.
Yeah,
he's pissed wet through, and he's probably thinking, this is shit.
Yeah.
People don't see that. Oh, this is amazing.
No.
You see all those people on doing the assault course, jumping through Peter's Pool and going through these tunnels. Yeah, you're doing that in the winter when it's freezing cold. You can't feel your hands. You can't feel your feet. You're fucking hanging out.
Yeah. But at least you get to do it with all loads of people that are in the same boat, I suppose, literally. And you get to share it a bit. It kind of makes it easier. But I think of all that pressure, like, I actually was thinking on the drive down here, I was thinking about, I'm sure we'll go on to, like, talking about how it, like, affected me and that. But I do specifically remember a time in Afghan, it was Christmas Day, and being sat at the table eating, you know, whatever kind of Christmas dinner we could, like, knock together. I'm thinking, this is fucking amazing. Like, everyone was there, all your mates are there. Life's really simple. Like, you knew what you're doing every day. You're going to patrol regardless of whatever it was, or what the outcome might be, or what your mission or objective was. But just sitting on that table with a Christmas hat on, and someone was dressed as, like, Banana Man, I think. For some reason, they got this, like, or Superman or something. And just thinking, yeah, this is brilliant. Everyone's here, and that's probably, sounds daft, but still my favourite Christmas I've ever had. Do you know what I mean? It's quite special, I suppose, in a way, just because of the unique situation. And you've talked about it before as well, just how beautiful the place was. And remember looking up at night and around that time in the winter when the air's really crisp and, like, you know, there's, like, cold on the end of your nose, and you look up and the sky is insane. It looks like it's CGI. Do you know what I mean? Just remember, like, almost dislocating my own neck and being like, whoa, like, this is insane.
I was super lucky because on Herrick 5 and towards the end of Herrick 12 as well, we ended up doing the mobile operation groups, the MOGs. And, you know, on Herrick 12, we revisited some of the places that I'd been before, and we'd been in contacts and stuff. On Herrick 5, we managed to go, like, all round, like, Helmand, you know, from Kajaki to Lashkar to Nadi Ali to Nowzad. Like, you know, a big broad spectrum, and seeing lots of different parts of Afghan, from, you know, being in lush green, like, pastures of down by the, you know, the Helmand River to, you know, up in the mountains, and seeing, like, these really Lord of the Ring-esque sort of places that have never seen any outsiders for, like, 50 years, and you rock up and you're in, like, these big dragons that breathe fire out the top of them, and they make lots of noise and stuff like that. And it's quite a humbling thing to an extent. But I've said it, like, a million times before, and one of the reasons why, you know, I keep saying on this podcast I'm writing a book and I'll fucking finish it in about 10 years. But, you know, putting all these experiences down so you know, my children can read what I've done, whether they're interested in it or not, I don't know. But but I think it's important to kind of relay not just so much about, like, the war fighting side of it, but also the other aspects of it, because there's a lot of focus these days on, and don't get me wrong, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, like PTSD and mental health, you know, people's negative reactions to war and all that sort of thing. But what you don't also see is, like, also the positive effects on it. the feelings and the drive that it gives you to keep going, like a soldier's drive that has left the military to do better, to want to go and do something on their own, their own personal belief in themselves, their positivity, the values and the moral values that they place onto their children for when they're growing up. Those experiences that you've gained are not necessarily not negative, because that's what it's seen as. They're also like really positive. And I think there needs to be a little bit of a swing in that dynamic, where it's kind of, you put it more to the positive side of things.
Yeah.
Because I think, you look at a lot of war films and stuff like that, and it's all really cool because you've seen things getting blown up, and like you see soldiers fighting and shooting and killing the enemy and stuff like that. But actually, like, what did it do for them personally? What positive things did it do for them personally? I don't think I'd be here now speaking to you in my own gym, putting everything together, my own therapy room that's in the back of here, being an entrepreneur, doing the things that I'm doing, having a full pension from doing a 22-year career, and having all that positivity behind me, even though the negative things are still there, those experiences that I've had. But I don't think that gets portrayed enough.
No. I think, I suppose that's a good segue onto the film, I guess, and what I'm kind of finding out about that community and what people have left to give.
Yeah. So Once We Were Warriors is a film that you're currently editing.
Yeah, just about. I mean, there's still a few kind of stones that we've left that we haven't turned over yet, I'll say, because when you make a film, you essentially write the film, you shoot the film, and you edit the film, and they're all 3 totally different films. So initially, like, the film came about because I got helped out by the RMA. They'd helped me with some therapy, and I went on a ski trip, which is the only time I've ever profed out of Passer. And Bish, who was my team commander in Afghan, like, really not only like accomplished Marine, but an accomplished sit skier now as well. He's there double lamp above the knee, but I don't want, like, that doesn't define him. Just that's kind of like what he's really taken to, as well as golf and climbing and all sorts of other stuff. It's like,
he was a Lance Jack when I first passed out of training in X-Ray Company.
Oh wow, cool. Yeah. So and he I just got like this phone call out of the blue from him, really. I hadn't spoken to him really for sort of, I guess, 11 years maybe. And he just sort of said, "Oh, do you want to come skiing?" And initially I felt guilty that was going, because I wasn't an amputee and I didn't have a traumatic brain injury or whatever else, and there was no, it took me and I'd really kind of rejected the community, like that community of people that I went away to Afghan with. I just didn't want anything to do with it. So I felt guilty, but I'd had a camera at this point for 2 years, so I just thought, well, while I'm here, I'll take some shots, I'll film a few bits. It's like filming on a stills camera. If you know anything about like filmmaking, it's not ideal. You can do it, but it's not ideal. You don't get any flexibility. And then gave it to the RMA, and they used it for a few clips in their like fundraising dinner at the Guildhall, which I just filmed for them last week. But hearing that to me was like incredibly empowering. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, someone thinks it's not shit, basically. And that's all I needed. Was to get back into the mix of those people and the community of people that understood me, and for them to just kind of take me who I was and as I am. And that's not like that worn-in sort of civvy trope that military people are mad, bad or sad. That's like something, a real drive that we wanted to change. And then Bish sort of said, like, do you want to come next year and have a proper go at the filming? And in that intervening 12 months, I started working for Simon Jeffries at the Natural Edge, who's like a SBS operator turned coach. And we were doing a YouTube channel kind of thing. So I had this like more deliberate idea about who it was I wanted to film. Made a short film called Finding an Edge, and it's basically about an ML called Baz Barrett, who got injured on Herrick 9 Whiskey Company. And I made this piece, 5-minute piece around him, And in it, he just sort of, you go on a bit of a short, it's only a short film, but a bit of a journey. He sort of says like, you know, in the mountains, or like, you know, being injured from going from a Royal Marines, I love my job, I was very good at my job, and being, you know, thriving in the outdoors, to now being an injured person, an injured veteran, where everything takes me a lot more time, you know, getting up out of bed, making myself a cup of tea, getting the kids ready, that just, you know, life's in slow motion. But when I'm in the sit ski and I'm in the mountains, then I'm finally the same speed as all my friends again. And that, like, you know, like cut me deep. That I was like, this is inspiring. I could hear this guy all day, every day as well. I got him mic'd up, and the self-talk and the attitude this bloke has is just like, it's bulletproof, mate. It's honestly, it's cast iron. And I took a lot from that. Gave that to the RMA as like a, you know, cheers easy, like thanks for the memories. This has been awesome. But that film got into Kendall Mountain Film Festival, Vancouver Mountain Film Festival, Santa Barbara Film Festival, London Film Festival. There is another one, I can't remember. Maybe another one after that, but I can't remember the name of it. And I showed that film to someone asked to see the film. A guy called Mick Cataldo, aka Sledgehammer, who was Simon Jeffrey's boss from Poole. So he did like, he's an army officer, went to Poole, did 14 years at Poole. He like badged with NIMS and stuff, so they like crossover with blokes there. And his kind of point on it was like, mate, like there's something in this. You can develop this. So that's when we kind of sat down and thought like, how do we, you know, what do we want here? What's the point of this film? And essentially it was like 10 years after the end of operations in Afghan, you know, 150,000 people in the British Armed Forces at one point or another served in that theatre of war. You know, what the fuck has happened to them? Where are they and what are they doing? Because they've got some incredible experiences, very unique experiences, insane insight, and were given a lot of responsibility and did the best they could with the tools they had at the time. Whether you were a fan of that war, whether you believed in it or not, whether you were inside the military or outside of it, like, that's history. They still went and did it, and lots of people got injured. Nearly 10,000 people. Was over 450 killed. I think it's like 453, 454. Don't quote me on the numbers. I don't want to disrespect like leaving someone out. But you know, for every casualty, there's 6 people that picked up that stretcher and it affected them. Do you know what I mean? There's a flight crew, like Liz talks about, you know, like dealing with that every day. So it's like the ripple effect of that war is kind of, it's untold. And we as veterans, me and this like small team of kind of this band of merry men and women that we kind of assembled to make the film, were like, well, it's never been told from our perspective. We understand it, but more importantly, we had access to those people. So we started crowdfunding it and figuring out what it was we wanted to, you know, make. And it is exactly that, is to challenge the trope of that veterans are mad, bad or sad, that a veteran today is probably different compared to the ones that everyone thinks they know. I mean, if you say the word veteran, when you Google it, it immediately tells you it's someone with a vast amount of experience, and they've been in the military maybe. You can be a veteran of lots of other things, but it's normally a military kind of perception. And they're like older, greying, you know, stood outside co-op with the RBL kind of pot. But when I left the Royal Marines, I was 23, and I certainly didn't look like a veteran, and definitely didn't feel like a veteran. And I don't know if you feel like a veteran. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to feel like one. I don't know. It's something. It's not like you get given a badge that says veteran.
I haven't got one yet.
You might get one. But you get it, and you're like, thanks. Is that what it's come to for those experiences? And yeah, for me, it's just been an amazing opportunity, I suppose, given the access we had to Bish and that skiing group, to understand what a veteran is. And we wanted to look at kind of the more holistic approach to how a veteran might redefine themselves, or how they might cope with those experiences and injuries, not necessarily in a kind of a bad way, in that way that everyone thinks, you know, like, oh, it's like some Mardy veteran because he's injured, or, you know, slow-mo looking at his medals or whatever. That's like all you ever see, like it's sort of like the X Factor Manandide model. Do you know what I mean? Like, cue piano music, sob story, make it easy for this person to be likable because they're going to come out of it and do a nice cover version of a song and the crowd's going to go mental. Do you know what I mean? So we knew we could be a bit more raw with it and a bit more authentic. So that was how it started. But during the filmmaking process, it just kind of changed, and kind of realised that it's not only about veterans, but in an arm's length way. I was kind of making it maybe to figure out a few bits that I hadn't kind of sorted myself. And that's because of my experiences on Herrick. Like, in short, it was being a point man. You're often first into most scenarios. You have that anxiety of, you know, not wanting to stand on an IED yourself, not wanting any of your mates to stand on an IED or get into a scenario. And, you know, like, long story short, we had, in our group, we had 3 lads killed. There was a blue on blue incident with a javelin that killed 2 lads. And then an IED strike that killed another guy. So those lads are Tom Sawyer, Danny Winter and Liam Elms. And then obviously all the casualties around that. And as a kind of barmer man, you're like, I found myself kind of in the mix of those situations, like literally top flapping body parts. And as a 19-year-old bloke, I'd kind of, I'll say bloke as a boy, wouldn't I? But found myself in those scenarios, just like, there's no template, there's no guidebook, there's no manual. That's the great thing about the Corps, is there's a manual for lots of things. There's literally a lecture, there's a practice period that you get, but when it comes to some of that stuff, it's so unique and niche, and the situations are dynamic. They're hard to compute and process. And yeah, Bish came back off his R&R and was like, I got rumbled. He was like, mate, what's the crack here? Like, you've lost your mojo. And I do remember when he said that, thinking like, fuck, like, people have worked me out, if you know what I mean. Like, they know something's wrong. So the film's kind of become a little bit about that as well. Like, okay, it goes from a veteran making a story about veterans to, you realise that the bloke making the film is had to rake up a load of old graves, and the people that are on this ski trip that they initially go on are all people that he went to Afghan with. One of them literally, like, was on the stretcher after he had his leg blown off in a patrol. We learn about his story, like, gets, you know, made redundant by his employer for an accident at work and ends up in prison. Essentially, that's how it kind of goes, and his kind of journey as well. So we initially thought the film was going to be finished and like putting it out to festivals about now, but yeah, we didn't know much about filmmaking before we started making it, other than like the short film and content I'd filmed and like all the YouTube episodes, which are, you know, trying to shape like documentaries anyway. But
well, I read the PDF that you sent to me, and you know, in my notes here, I've put that a lot of the people that you have there, it's not just like Afghan veterans, it's people from all boards, you know, all walks of life and stuff. And you've got like Falklands vets there.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a plethora of different people, different ages, different sexes, both male and female, dealing with different things. And I think it's really good to try and get that sort of like balance, and also the story of different kind of different things that happen. It's not necessarily just like the Afghan stuff, because, you know, the Afghan stuff is prolific in our minds because, you know, we were there and we did it. But, you know, you've got a Falklands guy there as well. You've got people that, you know, work within the other public services as well. And they see horrific things like day in, day out. And you know, that's their life. So being able to put that together and get their opinions in it, I think if you had, if it was me and I had all this content and different things that have happened to different people, it would be difficult to try and put that in a unique way, not generic, that people can resonate with, but different to what's out there.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's the thing. When we started making it, mate, we were like, well, it's going to be about this and it's going to fit into this box. And we did all the research and marketing and, well, I might have said box there, but went circle. But yeah, and then we realised like this is just a drop in like, my experience and the access I have to these people. That's a drop in the ocean. Like, who am I to say that this is the most important experience? Like, that's not for me to decide. What I am in the film and what the key characters are a sort of constant thread that everyone can tie themselves to. But we then found other charities that gave opportunities to veterans that were injured. So there's Armed Forces Para Snow Team, and that's the more like, I'd say, more competitive, less holistic approach that the RMA has taken with skiing. But they have a program called Frontline to Start Line, and they've literally taken people from the battlefield to the Winter Olympics, and they've got medals. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is phenomenal, but you wouldn't know. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I mean, Invictus and all that has become fairly prolific in the last few years, but we really felt it was important to broaden it, because you want to, by showing people other people's experience, right? What I'm realising is not everyone can articulate things the same way as you can or the same way as I can. So often what you can do is I can be a mouthpiece, you're a mouthpiece by doing this podcast, and you can present that information, and you might help someone by them hearing it, seeing it, being part of it maybe, and they don't have to explain themselves to themselves. They can just go, okay, I relate to this person, he's seen me, or they've seen me, and he's bang on, and I feel better. Do you know what I mean? That's like some of the feedback I've been getting from the few people that we've kind of shown it. And also, like, we just don't know these organisations exist, and we do touch on kind of suicide aspect of things, and we spoke to the RMA about that, who have supported our film, and they credit to them, they do not shy away from the stats and the reality of that side of things as well. But, you know,
from your perspective, what's kind of like your overall opinion of like all the different charities? Because there are so many different charities out there.
Yeah.
You know, we're a little bit kind of site orientated, like looking at one thing in front, because we've got the RMA and the Royal Marines charity because of where we come from. But like you say, well, you mentioned there, you've got like a ski charity. There's like, I could probably imagine that anything you can think of, climbing, walking, scuba diving, there is a form of charity that's going to help veterans do that certain thing.
Yeah, and I think that it's not, I don't know if it's trouble, but what we're realising is there is all these loads of groups, and it's so kind of splintered, I would say, and like maybe a bit disconnected. There is actually an organisation that's kind of, I cannot remember the name of it now, it's just like eluded me, but it's bringing them all together under an umbrella, so they're all sort of like, there's accountability there, and they're all not diluting the same mission essentially. But yeah, it's right. I didn't know the Armed Forces Para Snow Team existed. I know that the Royal Marines charity and Royal Marines Association existed, but I didn't know that they could really tailor sort of support and care to you. So I think like, well, they helped me out, and it literally changed my life. It started my new career. Them just saying, we're going to use some of your videos and put you on the ski trip, put me back in that community, made me feel like, don't be ashamed of your past, and don't be guilty about how you felt. Like, no one cared. People there, like double, triple amputees, TBIs and all that, they just were happy I was sat at the same table as them, and that's all I needed. And that, I mean, the worst it got for me was, you know, ideations of suicide and stuff, right? So if you know that there's an organisation out there that is just like the barrier to entry is so low. You just got to get in touch, and that's the hardest thing sometimes. But, you know, there'll be a surfing version. There's one called there's a good documentary called Resurface about veterans surfing. I'd recommend checking that out. I spoke to that director. It won an Emmy and stuff, and we kind of modelled a few bits of ours on that. But
American version.
Yeah. I think it's called the charity called Operation Surf. But if you know about them, and you kind of, I don't know how to. I know it's difficult for people, but you have got to kind of find a way to get on that radar, or be the person that nudges someone in that direction, and put it in front of people. That's what we want to do with this film. So we're chatting with a production company, trying to make it a co-production to get on terrestrial television. Because if you put it in a film festival, it's all very well and good, mate, but like, who goes to a film festival? It's normally filmmakers. Do you know what I mean? That isn't helping. Like, you want to put it on iPlayer, essentially. That would be the goal, because then like I said before, the barrier to entry is low, and someone can see it and say, get in touch, or it can change their life. And there was a guy on the last, actually the ski trip we filmed, but he didn't want to be filmed, who found out about the ski trip because of the short film that I made for the RMA. And he was talking to me, didn't know I'd made it, but he was like, oh yeah, I saw the ski film and saw people I knew, and you know, I thought it was just for young people, and he'd done like 30 odd years in the Corps. And like, mate, bloke called George in the film, he's kind of like just like a, I guess, tertiary character, but he represents that Falklands generation. But he was in Behind the Lines, the ML documentary, which is in the 80s.
Yep.
Right. And I was like, that's you, Jesus, wept. Like, it was brilliant to have him there. And he said, getting back with those group of people inspired him to, in our minds, probably quite simple things, but like got a smartphone, set up a WhatsApp group, reconnected with everyone that did that original course 40 years ago, and they organised a trip to Norway and went to the Hardangervidda, which is absolutely incredible. So one ski trip that this person gets invited on, now all of a sudden he's not that he was isolated before, but he's reconnected with people that understand him. And what you get from that is that shorthand, that unspoken kind of, you know, nod in the street that I was there, you were there, we all know. You don't have to say, talk if you want, but I got you, like I understand you, and that's all we want to do. And it's quite simple, but it's actually quite hard to get to that point.
What are your future projects? So you've got this that you're still developing. Have you got anything else like on the back burner at the moment, or is it just focusing on the Once We're Warrior?
So Once We're Warriors, is kind of, I say it's the main thing, but we essentially started it as a side project alongside the full-time project, which is working for Simon at the Natural Edge. So we just did an episode for them about Commando Ridge in Cornwall. So we've kind of like stumbled upon, that's our new kind of format. We're going to do, I think, 4 or 6 more episodes around like a documentary style presentation of some sort of like historic endeavour, but the mindset behind it. I'm trying to get one about the heavy water plant, you know, the Heroes of Telemark, because it's been a long time since the Ray Mears version of that. So we want to get that pushed into production next year. And then besides that, I do, I'm like just gone into sort of partnership at my company, which is Palper Films, with an ex-army guy who's like a marketing whiz and unbelievable camera operator and director of cinematography. So we're sort of developing that real, like, more documentary feel to whatever we can do, really. We've just done like documentary style testimonials, and now we're pitching something to this like quite bougie art company called Hauser and Worth. They do like, I don't know, expensive jam and nice art and stuff, and it's like just really genuine kind of content, but we want to push like the more filmmaking aspect of it. So, and then got a little girl and my wife at home, mate, so riding that wave, trying to keep all those plates spinning. As you know yourself, it's like when you go out on a limb and start something yourself, or a project, or like what you've built here, it's like there's no time off, there's no like, again, there's no arrival, it's just like constant, isn't it?
I don't know, I started this purely for the fact that, you know, I could go surfing. You know, I'm real lucky, man. I work a 15-16 hour week. That's teaching, that's excluding like doing stuff like this, like podcasts and stuff like that. But the cool thing about it is, like what we talked about at the very beginning of this, is the fact that if you do something that you enjoy, it's not your job.
No, yeah, you're right.
So I enjoy doing podcasts. I enjoy editing. I like making little shit films and stuff like that. Yeah, I say shit films because it's like my way of dealing with it, even if they're not shit. You know, it's just cool having a platform, and if someone's listening to it, brilliant, and they get something out of it, then that's amazing too. But if not, you know, I'm doing something. Yeah, and that's the main thing.
A man needs somewhere to go, something to do, and someone to love. Right? That's, you got those 3 things ticked. Like you're doing good, I think, and I'm fortunate that, well, someone like yourself invites me down, and I just get to basically spin dits about what I love doing. I mean, it's not always easy. Like sometimes, mate, get out of that bed at 5 a.m. You got to drive to Swansea or something to do a shoot. But before that, I was doing rope access and, you know, being in the steelworks in Port Talbot, just hating every minute of every day. And now I can genuinely say that what I do is, I was on a golf course yesterday shooting someone smashing a ball down a range and talking about how much I loved it, and finished at 2:00. Do you know what I mean? And it's fantastic, mate. And I had this identity of myself, which was a bootneck, but I don't think I'll ever go away. But now I'm a filmmaker that, you know, was in the Marines, and I get to take all that experience and have a voice and channel it into filmmaking. And I'm just really, I'm just really stoked on it. It's just really cool.
Where can people find out like all your content and stuff? So Instagram, Facebook, the films and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I do all the stuff for Simon Jeffries and The Natural Edge, so his old YouTube channel, any of his content you see, that's all filmed by me and produced by Palper Films, which is Palper Films Limited on Instagram, which is more of like, I don't post too much on there, but that's like where I put the things I want to do more of, if you know what I mean. And then Gob off on LinkedIn quite a bit. And then James Malone shoots as well on Instagram, is where my photography is. So yeah, go and check it out.
Legend. James, thanks very much for talking to me today, and good luck with everything.
Thank you, mate. Been a pleasure.
Cheers, buddy.
You too. Thanks.
And that's it. If you like the podcast, please like, share and subscribe on your podcast provider, and also leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.